and welcome to Godless Bitches 2.0. I'm your host, Clare Wuellner, and with me today are Tracie Harris and Jen Peeples.
Yay, everybody.
We actually have an audience out there today. It's awesome. Yay. All righty. So this is a show that aims to raise awareness of civil rights issues, progress, and setbacks from the past and present, as well as a discussion of what we hope will be realized in the future. This show, as well as a bunch of others, are a production of the Atheist Community of Austin, an educational nonprofit dedicated to the separation of government and religion and the promotion of positive atheism. In addition, the ACA promotes equal rights for all and humanistic charitable giving, both financial and in action. So there are three giant things that we want to talk about today, right? Who wants to start on which one?
Well, Joe Biden has made the news lately.
We get to talk about bodily autonomy again.
Yeah.
Because people just don't freaking get it.
Yeah. So he apparently did some unsolicited hugs.
Yeah.
And some hair sniffing and
I didn't hear about that one. That's a little weird.
Yeah, that was one of them.
That's really weird.
Some other, minor invasions of people's bodily autonomy that were kind of shocking to the people on the receiving end of that and caused them a little anxiety because that's kind of weird.
And he's very powerful.
Yeah. When you're standing there waiting to go out on stage to make a speech and the Vice President of the United States hugs you and sniffs your hair, it's a little weird.
Yeah.
And so, we need to have a discussion about this because people are freaking out over this. And of course, the women who are reporting this are being blamed because why didn't you speak up at the time? It's like, well, when you're about to go out on stage and make a speech because you're a candidate and the vice president is the one doing this stuff, what are you supposed to do about that?
Yeah.
So anyway, people are freaking out over this because at the heart of it, they don't really get what bodily autonomy is about. So the responses to this are ranging from, oh my God, it's another Me Too moment.
And the Me Too movement has gone too far.
Yeah,
is what I keep hearing. It's like, oh God.
Yeah, this has gone too far, and it's not like he raped her.
Gosh.
This was totally non-sexual.
Yeah.
And, no one accused him of rape. No one accused him of making a sexual advance. No one accused him of anything like that. What the people who are, clutching their pearls over this are missing is that these behaviors exist on a spectrum. It's either sexual assault or it's okay. There's a whole range of behaviors in the middle there.
Yeah.
That anything from this sort of unsolicited physical contact with people all the way up to actual rape. And you can have everything in between, and it's all wrong. And it's not all criminal.
Yeah.
And no one's accusing him of criminal conduct or anything like that.
Yeah.
I think what's weird to me, more than Biden, what's weird to me are the defenders.
Yeah, they're the ones.
So it's like with Biden, what I saw was, okay, so he does the touchy-feely thing. He's on the far end of the spectrum on wanting to touch people. And there's no, people are like, oh, you can't even hug anybody now. It's like, no, you just have to say, can I hug you?
Yeah.
Or, if you see somebody in pain and you have this urge to touch them, I think we have all experienced this, or most of us have experienced it. And all you have to do is say, oh my God, I want to hug you. Like, can I hug you?
Would you like a hug?
Yeah, I have done that personally. I mean, I've done it, and it's not hard. There's nothing difficult about it. On the other side of the spectrum, there'll be people that come to the show. I don't know how comfortable they are with what. They'll be here for the after dinner, and sometimes they'll put out a hand, or I'll do the open arm hug thing, or they'll do an open arm hug thing, and it's just an invitation. They don't just come up and grab me, right? They and I sort of do that kind of dance of handshake, hug. What are you okay with? And then we decide. And if they're comfortable with a handshake, then we handshake. If they're comfortable with a hug, then we hug. And there are people in my life that I'm comfortable hugging, and people in my life I'm not comfortable hugging, right? And they're all my friends. It's just a different dynamic with each of these people, right? It doesn't, and it's just about what I'm comfortable with because it's my body, and so I get to decide who hugs it and who doesn't hug it, right? And I understand totally that you can have an urge to hug someone or to even give them an affectionate, supportive kind of kiss or something, and I get that. We all understand that. Nobody's saying that you can't do it, that it's horrible to do this to a person, that all we're saying is before you do it, just consider the other person and do it in a way that allows them to back out of it if they don't want to do it. Don't just go and throw it on them, right? This is it. That's like it in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Nothing hard, nothing weirdly egregious, nothing telling people that we think they should be locked up and that no one can hug each other anymore. And, it's like nothing like that.
Right.
Just show an ounce of respect before you do the hug.
One thing I've seen several times in one form or another is, I'm a very touchy person. This is so hard for me. I'm like, okay, flip side. The not very touchy person.
Right.
It's hard for them too. Just think about that. And Joe Biden, I'm sure he's feeling very fatherly to everyone or some such. Not everybody wants to receive that sort of thing, and he needs to be aware of it. And if he were aware of it, this would be happening. But it happens. Okay, so what do you do then when somebody comes up with it? You say, I'm sorry, I didn't know, and I'm going to do better. And instead, no.
Right.
So
his reactions to it, after watching a couple, I guess, there was like one that he did initially that was a statement that basically said, I'm sorry people were offended by it.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
But I don't mean it to be offensive, therefore, not a problem.
Non-apology.
Yeah. And then he issued another statement that was something like, it was like a video statement that went on and on about, I don't mean it that way. And I kept listening to it thinking, what way?
Yeah.
I know how you mean it. You mean it benignly. You mean it supportively. Like, I get how you mean it. So why do you keep explaining to me how you mean it? Like, why is that even relevant, right? So it's almost like, well, it's not almost like, it's like when you hear him issuing this, it's not even an apology. When you hear him issuing these statements, all I'm hearing is that he thinks that it's a confusion on the part of the person who's offended about what he intends. And it's like, that's not what it is. Now, here's the thing. After a couple rounds of this, I just was like, I'm putting my hands up on this one. Biden doesn't understand what the problem is. Like, he understands that there's a problem, but he doesn't understand what it is. He still thinks it's that they don't understand that I don't mean it sexually. And it's like, no, that's not the problem. But here's the thing. You're saying you'll be more cognizant that it makes people uncomfortable and you will be more careful going forward about how you touch people. That's going to have to be good enough. Okay? Yeah. If you're going to run for office, we have to understand that you don't really understand bodily autonomy, but you at least understand you have to keep your hands off people unless you have permission to touch them. You may not understand why, but hey, you're willing to adjust the behavior going forward. So this is what we're going to get, and so we have to proceed. There's no point in doing several more rounds of something that you don't understand. So let's just move on.
Right.
And I kept saying that like every day, every day, because every day there was a new story, right? So, and 3 days in a row, I was just like, I have to swear off MSNBC until this thing blows over because I can't watch Mika Brzezinski and her rape apologists.
I know.
Responses to everything like this. Her responses to Kavanaugh, her response to the Ansari thing, her response to this. I'm just like, I can't take her.
Yeah.
She is on the side of the predator like every time. And that's where it lies. It's up to you to stop somebody from raping you. It's up to you to stop somebody from sexually assaulting you. It's up to you. It's your problem if you don't like somebody touching you. That's where her head is. So I'm like, okay, I can't watch her anymore because I keep bitching about this thing on Facebook. And then I heard Barbara Boxer give her thing on a panel, and there was actually somebody there opposing her that, brought up this issue. And I was just like, wow, okay, so she doesn't get it either, right? And I think it's kind of painful for me that a lot of the reactions that I'm having the most trouble with are from women who possess voices.
Right.
And possess a platform in media or in power structures that are coming out and saying all the wrong things, right?
Yep.
Now, let me just be fair. There have been a lot of women that have come out and like really put forward the dialogue and really, you know, moved it ahead and explained it extremely well. But when you're getting pushback from other women who are supposed to be in positions to advocate for women, it's really sad, right? That really saddens me. And so one of the things I posted about Boxer, she was on, and there was a younger woman on with her, and, you know, Boxer's giving this narrative of, well, this used to be okay, it's not okay anymore. And I was like, no, this didn't used to be okay, right? What used to be the case is that women put up with it because they didn't have an option, because the people writing the narratives were sexist men in power, right? And when sexist men in power write the narrative, the story that comes out is one that women really liked all this groping and grabbing and paternalistic treatment.
Or at the very least, we're just okay with it.
Right. And so one of the things I talked about was how when you read literature from the past, you know, you've got these women put into these subjugated roles. But when you read literature written by women, you get a different story. And when you read literature written by some men, you get a different story, but those men usually had their stories banned or changed before they could be publicly consumed.
Right.
Right? So if a guy wrote a book like Anna Karenina and she says, screw this, I'm leaving my husband, oh, we have to rewrite that to where she comes back. Or we have to rewrite it to where she kills herself with remorse for having done this awful thing about leaving a situation that was completely unsatisfying to her as the subjugated wife. And so when you have had voices that have tried to give the narrative, but they have been silenced throughout history and basically told, no, women like this subjugation, shut up, right?
Yeah.
And so what I posted was about what this young woman said, right? She made the point that that kind of paternalistic touching means something in the context of women in the workplace that is different than men. Right? Because one of the things Barbara Boxer brought up was, well, he does it to men too. And so this younger woman was saying, yeah, but it's a different context, right? Yes, it's wrong. It's wrong to touch anybody. You know, it's a boundary violation to touch somebody without asking. It's a boundary violation to touch a man without asking. It's a boundary violation to touch a woman without asking. But when you do it to a woman, it's also sexist. And so what she was pointing out was that in the workplace, this context has been thrown onto women very much, and this is something that they've had to deal with and put up with, and that now they're being asked to put up with it and being told that, you know, they're out of line for speaking out against it.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I posted was about, I said, the way women have historically traditionally been treated in the workplace when I was a kid was the stuff of many sexual assault jokes. I can't count how many movies, cartoons, and comics featured some buxom woman worker whose coworkers lusted after her or whose boss was either outright grabbing her ass or always finding some friendly way to touch her. It was put forward as normal because a lot of women didn't work, and those that did were often in low-level jobs where they basically had no choice but to put up with it. So what I did is I posted this article, and it's titled Conical Bras, Minuscule Waists, and Very Short Skirts. Sexy secretaries from the swinging 60s reveal how office girls and blah, blah, blah. I mean, you get the idea. And it shows like 3 big thumbnails across the top of like a woman, really busty woman in her in front of a typewriter.
Right.
And then it's got the sexy. And these are all old photos from the 60s. These aren't like mocked up for this article. And then one is like, you know, got the woman and she's wearing the short skirt, got her legs crossed, and she's giving this flirtatious smile as she's taking dictation. And there's another one leaning forward to do her steno, and her boobs are hanging out, and she's got the cleavage and the low-cut dress. And these are the secretaries, right? And it's funny because even when you see a show that was intended as progressive, like the original Star Trek, right? Like, how are the girls dressed, right? Like, you get these women, and they are, you know, it's the slung neckline, and the short mini skirt, and the go-go boots going on, right? And so there was this perception back when I was younger that women in the workplace were sort of half eye candy, half could type a letter. And there was even the joke where she can't do anything, where she's like a complete incompetent, and literally everyone knows the boss just hired her because she comes in tight skirts, right? And that's why she's there. This was women in the workplace and how they were portrayed back then. And you have to think in terms of a lot of women didn't work because the expectation was that it would be a single income household back then, right? So these women working probably had to work,
Right.
in a lot of cases. So they have to go to this job. They need this money, and this is how they're being portrayed and really how they're being treated. And so then what I did is in the first comment, I posted one of the photos from the article that shows the boss reaching over, and may I demonstrate this on you? Like the boss is reaching over to the secretary, and he has her little chin in hand, right? And so
God
he's holding
almighty.
the little, then he's standing up over her, smiling at her, and she's all smiles back, right? And this wasn't appropriate, right? So women didn't consider this, oh, I'm sorry, I've got to shut this thing down. God, did not shut my sound off. So this was not appropriate back then. It was simply portrayed as appropriate. It was portrayed as this two-sided thing. Like
Right.
women are into it, the men are into it, and this is how it is.
And this is the norm.
But it's men writing the story.
Right.
It's men making the movies. It's men drawing the comics.
Yep.
These are men's voices, and not, like I said, there were men who wrote and who produced, expressions of, hey, how women are treated really sucks. But those men were squelched as well, right? And a lot of times when women did produce something, they had to produce it using a man's name just to get it out, right?
Yep.
So you had this situation where these women were being subjugated and treated horrendously. And this was put up with for many, many years. And I think what a lot of people don't grasp is that part of the anger that's coming out of Me Too is about this idea that somebody would step up and say, well, this used to be acceptable. No, it didn't used to be acceptable. It used to be portrayed as acceptable, but it was only acceptable to the sexist people who were kept writing this narrative as normal and okay and an acceptable way to treat people, right? So this was not okay. It was simply a narrative where the person on the receiving end of the crap stick didn't have an opportunity to tell their story and to get their narrative out. And the few times they tried, it was knocked down, right?
Yeah.
Peyton Place was scandalous, right? It was scandalous because when a young girl gets pregnant, she's the town slut, right? She's not supposed to be the young girl that's being raped by her stepfather and everyone in town knows it, but nobody will do anything about it. And then when she gets pregnant, you blame her for it.
Yeah.
That's the narrative that comes out of Peyton Place, and that's the narrative that pisses off all the righteous, church lady folks and the church, the men and the deacons. They're the ones that don't want to hear that.
Yeah.
But they're the ones that let it happen.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And that still happens in a lot of religious communities. If the youth pastor starts, screwing the young girls,
Yeah.
and one of them complains,
Yeah.
then she has to apologize to usually the congregation, but often the pastor himself for tempting him.
Right. What did you do, or why didn't you, right? And that I think that's Mika's line, right? Mika Brzezinski, that's her line. Why didn't she? Why didn't she? Not why did he? Why did he assume this was okay without getting her permission? It's why didn't she do X? And it's like, hey, man, if the person who initiated this did not ask permission, there's no more questions. There is no more questions. You did the wrong thing. And whatever fallout there is, you screwed up.
Yeah. Well, and you were talking about behaviors in the workplace and people, putting their hands on people in the workplace. Touching someone in the workplace is an expression of dominance over that person, no matter whether it's male or female. So the kid who's working in the mailroom at the large corporation
Is not.
does not walk up and put his hand on the shoulder of the CEO.
No.
That does not happen because everybody knows that kid does not have a right to touch the CEO. The CEO, on the other hand, may come down to the mailroom and put his hand on the shoulder of the mail clerk in a sort of paternal way and, give him some encouragement because, touching someone is an expression of dominance. It says, I can touch you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's something that we need to have a conversation about, collectively. Is that really how we want to operate in a workplace? Yeah. Yes, that sort of behavior is probably regarded as pretty benign, and I get that. But what if the kid in the workplace really doesn't like being touched? What alternative does he have? You know?
I don't feel it as benign because in academia it happened a lot to me. And it's degrading, it's demoralizing.
Yeah.
I feel it's very clear in that moment where I am in the hierarchy.
Yeah.
And it has nothing to do with my ability or my actual degree or anything like that. I'm seen as somehow less.
Yeah.
And so I think it's very harmful, actually. And
it's a very different experience when someone more powerful comes in and puts their hands on you in whatever way than it is two colleagues who are more or less equal in the workplace who walk up to each other and, give someone a friendly pat on the back and say, hey, that was a great presentation you did today. I really enjoyed it, or something like that.
But honestly, how often do you even do that, right? Like,
Well, yeah.
I don't have kids, but I go a very long time without touching another human being. Like, I can go days and days. Like, I have a date night on Wednesday nights, but outside of that, if I didn't have that, I bet you other than when I just did that demo with Claire, I don't remember the last time I had to touch another person, right? Like, why do I need to touch other people?
Well, yeah, and one of the comments I made on a friend's wall on Facebook is that as I was making this comment, I said, I'm sitting in a room with 3 colleagues, all of whom I like and respect very much. But if one of them walked up behind me and put his hands on my shoulders or sniffed my hair, we'd have a problem.
Yeah, that would not be normal in my workplace.
I would be in the hospital.
I wouldn't
No, I know,
like,
I'm just-
assault them, but
Yeah.
we would have like an interpersonal conflict right then and there.
Yeah. And the power differential, Joe Biden does this to you, and I don't care if you're Michelle Obama or anybody else. If you, in the public eye especially, or in front of anybody else, refuse such a gesture, oh my God, the fall.
Which is
pressure to comply.
Yeah, which is basically what is happening now. So this whole situation reminds me of the elevator gate situation.
Ah, yes.
Where all you had was a woman make a very, mild statement on a YouTube video that said
PSA.
basically, it basically said,
was.
guys, don't do this.
Yeah, and it was like a minuscule part of a longer video that was just about how great the conference was.
Yeah, so she described
It's like, oh, there was this one awkward incident, blah, blah, blah. And then it just went absolutely
and all of a sudden, people are
wild.
saying, oh, it's not like, some Muslims held you down and mutilated your genitalia, but, fine, make a big deal out of this. Or, it's not like he was trying to rape her, and how do you know he wasn't really interested in coffee? And all this stuff, and, on and on and on. It's like, no, this was just about, social behavior that is awkward and problematic, and she's describing how this puts people in a very uncomfortable situation. And so if you want to have positive interactions with people, don't do this. That's all it was. But yeah, you would think that, this is like the worst thing ever. She publicly shamed this guy. She did all these horrible, she didn't even name him, okay?
I don't know who he was.
Yeah, nobody knows who he was. And so, I'm sure he does. Maybe he's examined his behavior and realized that, hey, that was not the best idea.
Having served on boards that have to deal with this
Yeah.
over and over again, that I'm willing to bet that it's not the first time or the last time he's made such an uncomfortable. Because it's usually the same person over again that they just don't get it, and then they get banned from organizations, and then they're like, oh my God, these women. Rah, rah, rah.
But and then you have the people saying, "Oh, well, we can't even shake hands anymore," without grasping that what Tracie said, a handshake. When you hold your hand out to shake someone's hand, that's an invitation.
Yeah, I actually have.
Accept it or not.
I actually know somebody who doesn't handshake.
Yeah,
right? They won't handshake, and I've told this story before because I think it's important. I learned that when, hey, nice to meet you. They didn't respond. Okay.
Yeah.
We went on to become friends, and we were friends for several years, and kind of grew apart. It's like I haven't heard from them in a while, but there was nothing, no fallout or anything, no problem with them. So I remember one time someone else met them, and same thing happened, right? So it was just like, hey, good to meet you, and he's like, yeah, I don't shake hands, and went off. So they all, were doing our thing, and this person who had tried to shake his hand comes up to me and says, how come he doesn't shake hands? And I said, I don't know. I've never asked.
Yeah.
Right. It doesn't matter to me. All that matters is he doesn't
That's what he
shake
wants.
hands. Right? So I don't shake hands. I don't. It's like, so what? If you know what I mean? And I'm not saying that it's wrong to ask, but what I am gonna say, it's like you should ask him. Right? You should just say, "Oh, that's interesting. I don't know many people who don't shake hands. Is there, what's the reason for it?"
And
Like,
asking like that, not like, what's wrong with you?
right?
Which
Yeah.
is-
Yeah, and that's how I saw another woman with a voice put it. She said something like, it's to respect these people who have, what did she call it? Like a thing about personal boundaries. And I'm like, there's no thing about personal boundaries. Everyone has personal boundaries. I guarantee you, there is something someone could do to you physically that you would say, hey, don't do that. I don't like, even if it's punching you in the face.
Yeah.
There's something you wouldn't want done to you physically. And it's totally your right to say, I don't want that done to me.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if it's outside the norm. Now, as somebody who studied anthropology, this is within societies, there are zones where you touch somebody, it's sexual. There's zones where you touch people where it's more benign. There are zones where it's like considered publicly acceptable. You touch other people this way. If you meet them, you don't know them. It's like so there is this range of touch, right? I think that, kissing someone in the back of the neck is probably outside the standard range of what we all consider normal public interaction, right? Now, and that doesn't mean that I'm saying like, oh, this is horrible, right? Like what I'm saying is, even if I want the time from somebody, right? And you don't do that as much now because everybody's got their phone, but it's like when in the days of watches, you would say, hey, do you have the time? And if someone didn't hear you or whatever, you might tap them. You tap them on a shoulder in a very benign zone, and you would say, and you know what I love? All of the starts to those public stranger interactions express apology.
Right.
Pardon me.
Yes. Right.
May I, have the time? Excuse me. I'm sorry to bother you, but, right? So there is this understanding, even encoded into our everyday language, that you are imposing on the person just by bothering them while they're out in public trying to do their public stuff, whether it's commerce, purchasing, bartering, getting medical treatment. The person is out that day to do something, and it was not to tell me what time it was, right?
Right.
So I am bothering this person to ask them for the time, and the appropriate intro to that for somebody who doesn't live in the United States, if you're telling them here's how you do it, you go up and you apologize for bothering the person, and then you ask for the favor of what you want. They may or may not give it to you, and you might get an annoyed response. But in general, most people will respond positively and give you the time, right? This is how it works. But even in those situations, I don't usually tap a person if I can get their attention just saying, excuse me. Right? I mean,
And you're
that's all
still
it takes.
apologizing for
For just
interrupting
bothering
them.
them.
Yeah.
That's a whole other issue, but it's like, that's about respecting other people's times and lives and just in general that they are not here to serve me with a watch.
But what you don't do is walk up and grab the watch and look.
I know. I know.
And this isn't sexual.
It wasn't. It's totally
What's
not
really
sexual.
What's really funny though is we have more respect for property than other people's bodies, right? And I posted something about that where I was saying, you would not use my car without asking me. You would not walk into my house, even if my door was wide open. You would not walk into my house without permission, without an invitation, right? I mean, it's absolutely, most people would be like, what are you doing? And this is what's funny. Like I had Halloween one time, some little toddler, we opened the door to do the trick-or-treat thing, and they just came running into the living room. And the parents were kind of freaked because they knew they couldn't cross that threshold, right? So the parents are like, they understood the propriety there of, we can't just come into your house, but that's kind of our little thing that just ran into your house. And I just moved aside and I said, why don't you go get it? Because I didn't want to freak the kid out, right? I don't know how she's going to react like a stranger going and grabbing her. So it's like, please come in and collect your child. But that's the thing. They understood the protocol. The toddler doesn't get it. They haven't learned yet the social protocols of you don't run into someone's house.
Right.
If you don't enter my house without my permission, it's considered a crime if you do. But you can touch me without my permission, right?
Yeah, right.
In ways that might go beyond what is like a normal. And there are people that are saying that this is fine. And it's like, it's fine because they don't intend it as sexual. It's like, no, it's not fine. Like my body is more important to me than my house and my car, Like, seriously.
And, the other thing this whole thing reminds me of is getting back to the whole handshake, and some people don't even want that level of contact with someone.
Right.
Several years ago, I was on a university panel discussion. It was like an interfaith panel, and it had people from several different religious traditions, including this Muslim guy. And I guess he's the imam of a local mosque or something like that. So anyway, afterwards, we're all walking around and socializing, and I walk up to him, and he had been shaking hands with some of the other panelists. And I walk up and I extend my hand, and he's like, I'm sorry, I don't shake hands with women. It's part of my faith. I don't touch women that I'm not related to.
I guess that's better than unclean, right?
So I was like, oh, okay, no problem, And I was talking about this after.
I guess you wouldn't like it if I licked your face. No, seriously though, it's a boundary, right? I mean,
right.
It's
and
the
so
person's
people were
boundary.
saying, "Oh, you should have walked up and hugged him then, or whatever." I was like, "No way."
No, you
I said,
don't.
Look, because their justification was, well, his religious beliefs are silly,
Doesn't
and you should just
matter.
disregard them. And I'm like, I don't really care why he doesn't want me to shake his hand.
Right.
He just said he didn't want to shake my hand. That's
Right.
all I need to know.
Yeah.
And of course, I'm not going to touch him.
Right. And you can walk away thinking sexist asshole.
Yeah.
But you still don't touch the person.
Right.
Right.
But yeah, I walked away thinking, how his religion had so poisoned his
Yeah,
mind.
exactly.
That,
Yeah, totally.
He that this is his justification for not doing that.
But it's still his body.
But it's like, hey, you know what? I know lots of people that don't want. They're basically, they have a form of OCD, and they don't want to touch people because they're afraid of germs.
Yeah.
Or whatever. And it's like, that's fine. I'm not gonna trigger an OCD episode in somebody just because I think, well, you should just get over that.
So I had a really long Facebook interaction with someone that I'm glad I'm friends with, that are kind of a little outside of my little insulated bubble, because then I get to hear other things that I didn't know about. And this was something that I was like, oh, okay. Wow, that's taking it to an extreme. So she says, well, let's see, where should I start this? Let's work to create a society, this is her, that allows one to speak up without backlash, but not one that puts up barriers to human interactions. So she thinks that asking permission creates a barrier.
Yeah, I've seen that a lot lately.
Yeah, because there will eventually be no limits to these barriers. In another post, someone suggested doing hugging consent even with your own kids. And I'm like, yeah, I mean.
I wonder if she would be for lowering the standards for entering a house.
Didn't have to go there. We yeah, but I mean, yeah. It's
Does
illogical.
it create a barrier to
Yeah.
human interaction that I'm not, inviting and welcoming and hospitable to strangers to allow them to just walk into my house? It's
Yep.
the fact that I have a door on the, a lock on my door,
Yeah.
Or the door even there. Is
Yeah.
that a barrier or a boundary to human interaction?
Right. Well, like we're social animals, but that means you also have to have rules and boundaries.
Yeah.
And that's not just women saying, it's what's necessary to help things run normally. So, may I kiss you or hug you to the child? How do we do that with newborn babies? Oh, come on. I get it that not everyone likes to be touched, even if friendly and well-meaning, but for others, it's part of our bonding with other humans in this world. Again, what about me? Okay, what about the other?
Yeah, but this is the thing. Before you go on,
Yeah.
I mean, every time it's so amazing to me how we have so much that revolves around consent in this society, where you have to ask permission to do a thing. Like I said, go into someone's house, use someone's car, borrow my rake, right?
Yeah.
You have to ask, and yet somehow, when you say it's okay to hug people, it's okay to kiss them, it's okay, just ask, just ask. You might as well say, just cut off your right arm, because to them, this is just like the worst thing in the world, that they would actually have to open their mouth and say, is this okay? That to them is just like the worst thing in the world. You would think that, I don't even know what in their heads is what is their barrier
They think that
to confirming the other person and respecting the other person, making sure they're okay with it before they do it to them.
their action is well meant, and so they expect you to know that. What they don't know is, the other person maybe understands that it's well meant. That doesn't mean it's welcome.
Right.
They don't understand that difference. And
This is, that's a codependent attitude.
yes, that's this.
Yeah, that's codependency.
Right.
That's saying that, it's just me and you are the same, and that you have to see it like how we're like, I can't tell the difference between you and me. I can't understand if it's okay with me, why isn't it okay to you?
Yep.
That's what that is.
Yep. So, let's see. But she says that this sort of touch is part of our bonding and the humans in this world. I'm like, touch is important.
Yeah, but
Bonding.
nobody's saying you can't touch.
Right.
Right.
But she seems to think that this means that we're all going to walk around like this and may I hug you? Or I don't know.
Unless I don't walk down the street hugging people anyway.
Right.
I mean, like I said, I very often, infrequently even do this.
Right. Well, so I replied with a link to all the research that says, yes, you should teach your children about bodily consent, and no, they
Yes.
don't have to hug Aunt Martha or kiss whatever, just because you say so. And then I think that consent, this is me, I think that consent increases the ability of humans to find the best sort of intimacy. Asking for consent doesn't mean that nobody is to touch anybody ever. It means you only touch people who want to be touched. How could anybody be against that?
Right.
And she says, that's not what I am suggesting. Some kids don't like to be touched. That's okay. You have to adjust to the individual kid. But using the analogy of asking consent in a casual, transactional, sexual relationship to apply to a long-standing, bonding, loving relationship you have with your own child is inappropriate.
So wait a
Let's
second.
unpack that.
Yeah, I mean, is she basically saying that she doesn't think you get implied consent, right? So for example, you and I are in a relationship, it's sexual, we have this thing going on, we've established these boundaries and we work within them. I know what's okay with you and what's not okay with you, and if I want to try something new, I say, hey Claire, I'd like to try this new thing, are you cool with it? I don't just spring it on you one night. And so this is, nobody is saying that there are not these, that you can't have a friend or somebody close to you that you have established boundaries with.
Yep.
And that you all understand what's okay and not okay, and that you understand, like if I go to do something to you that is okay, just like earlier, I didn't just do that to you. I said, is it okay if I demonstrate this on you? Because I'm going to touch your freaking face.
Yeah, it's really
right?
intimate.
Yeah. And so this is like something where I would never do it, even though you and I are friends, and even though it would have been a demonstration that makes sense in the context of everything, I still know that it's not normal for me to walk up and touch your face. No matter how close we are, we don't have that as an understanding. And so I asked you, can I do this? If you and I were lovers, I would touch your face and probably expect that it's fine, right? Now, if you had something going on with your face, like you had some pain on in your mouth or something, and you might say like, oh no, not today, and then I would be like, okay, cool, yeah, no, what's the problem? And you would be like, but yes, people, we're not talking about people and relationships with whom you have established boundaries. This is about people with whom you have not established boundaries, or with whom you have not established this new boundary.
Yeah. Well, what I wanted to ask her was, okay, so you've had sex with your husband before. Does that mean it can never be rape?
What did she?
Yeah.
Oh, you wanted to ask?
I wanted to, because
yeah.
I'm trying to turn her over to my side.
Now, that used to be the law, right?
Yeah, I know. See, it's not.
It used to be the law that if you married somebody, they could not rape you. Any sex they had with you was consented to, and that was the same. This is the same consent thing they use with abortion, right? You consented to sex, so you consented to pregnancy, so you consented to marriage, so you consented to sex, and so you could never ever give up that consent while you're married to the person.
Right. And with my kids, I'm sure you do the same thing. There are instances where you just know you need to ask before you do something.
I frequently ask my son if it's okay if I give him a hug.
And especially, they're at this age where you're like, do I touch him? Do I not? Because they're really figuring out.
And and the thing is, he's really very affectionate, very sweet, and everything. And he always says yes. But it's important for me to get across to him that asking is never inappropriate.
Right.
And I have to bring this up because I had this really great conversation with him the other day, and it was about consent. And this conversation was about, so if you're dating a girl and she drinks too much and she passes out, is it ever okay to just have sex with her? Even if you were talking about having sex before. And he's like, no. And I said, okay, what if you've already had sex with her before and, you have that relationship? Can you have sex with her? And he's like, no, you can't. And I said, well, why is it wrong to have sex with her if she's passed out? Even if you think she probably would say yes. I said, is it because she can't say no? And he's like, no, it's because she can't say yes. So he's already not thinking about absence of no means it's okay. He's looking for the yes.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, that's where we want to be.
They had recently, I'm glad you brought that up, and they had recently I'm going to say recently, we've had a lot of Me Too conversations. During this Me Too thing, there was somebody that was in the private sector that got called out on some stuff. I don't know if it was one of these media guys or what, the moguls. But one of the things they said was, I understand no means no. And it was headbanging moment for me.
Yeah.
Because I really, that little quote can't die a fast enough death as far as I'm concerned, right? Because no means no means that you have already initiated something that's not okay.
Right.
So what that's saying is you just make your move, and if the person tells you it's unwanted, then you stop.
Right.
Instead of you don't lay hands on them until you have a yes. And that's what I said. I was talking about this with a group of people, and I said the no means no thing is just so infuriating to me.
Right.
I said yes means yes. Is what it needs to be.
Right.
And she said something similar to what you just said. She's like, I have a couple boys that I'm raising, and I try to teach them this every day.
Yeah.
Right on.
And
no means you've already done it.
right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And
Oh my God, yes, that's true.
And I mean, if you're concerned about your son being accused of rape, this is what you want to teach him. It's like, yes means yes. If you hear anything other than yes, don't even go there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't teach them to beware of women and all of their conniving ways instead, which is what the message was quite a bit.
And for anybody wondering, just FYI, all of this applies to men as well, right?
Exactly.
Nobody
Yes.
should ever do this to you. Nobody should be subject to any of this. And the conversation, I think, revolves the way it does because of the context that I was describing earlier with how there's this traditional history of subjugation of women that is a little different than the male population. But at the same time, nobody's saying that it's okay to do any of this to men. And I just want to make that clear.
Well, and, getting back to the kids and their boundaries, and when is it okay for an adult to put their hands on a kid? And so a lot of people know that I'm a martial artist, and I also teach. And so I teach really little kids sometimes, so 4 to 7 year olds are in our, youngest class. And so the reality is they're not actually there to learn a lot of Taekwondo. We teach them a few techniques and everything, but they're really there to learn things like self-discipline and goal setting and basic life skills kind of things.
Although I have seen a 5-year-old black belt.
Yes.
And he was awesome.
They're pretty rare.
I watched that kid do his little forms test, and I was just like, "What the hell did I just see?"
Yeah,
That's a your Mozart sort of situation.
yeah. Some of the kids are just amazing. Well, I mean, all of them are in their own way are pretty amazing. But I mean, one of the things that we're teaching them in that class is that you can assert your own boundaries while also respecting other people's boundaries, and those things are not mutually exclusive. One of the things we do to teach them that is that a lot of times the parents will encourage the kids to come up and give me a hug after class or something like that. Encouragement is fine. Telling them they have to give me a hug is not okay. And I will always say something to the parents that, no, they do not have to hug me.
Right.
They have to bow to me. They have to say, yes, ma'am. They have to respect me as their teacher in class. They do not have to hug me. That's not part
a whole other level.
That's not part of martial arts.
Right.
I don't hug my instructor. You know,
No, I would never occur.
that's, you know,
Yeah, that's not the rules that are set up in a dojo at all.
no.
Yeah.
And so, and even when I'm teaching them, if I need to touch them for some reason, maybe they're doing a kick, you know, the wrong way, and I need to guide their foot or something, I always ask them, sir or ma'am, is it okay if I assist you with this technique? Can I touch your foot?
Yeah.
You know, and I will always do it so that the parents can see what I'm doing, and I always do exactly what I tell the kid I'm going to do. I don't touch them someplace where I didn't tell them first.
Yeah.
You know, and so these are things that are not an impediment to me teaching them. It's not an impediment for the kid learning them, but they're learning a very important lesson. That someone in their class who's very powerful in the class, because I'm their instructor, is respecting their bodily integrity the whole time.
Oh yeah.
And Jeff, that's a good one, just kind of hitting on the codependency thing and what you're talking about. Part of this is like the people who have trouble with allowing someone to reject the touch is they seem to get offended by people not accepting it and liking it, right? So, and this goes to the idea, it's just like when someone buys you a gift and they don't know you well and they buy you something you don't like, right? And there's, if I get offended that somebody doesn't like my gift, I need to ask myself what's going on in my head. That's when I need to self-reflect. I need to stop and say, wait a minute. I bought this gift. I didn't know what they like or don't like, and they don't like it, right? Or I made these cookies and I offer them to you and you say, is there eggs in it? Because I don't eat eggs. And I get offended because, you know, you don't want my cookie.
God, it just isn't.
Well, it's a codependent
No, I
thing,
get it.
right?
I've
and
seen it.
It's about this idea that, but you're somehow offending me by not being willing to accept what I want to give you. And it doesn't allow the person to have their own boundaries about what they want or don't want, because it's confusion, right? It's boundary confusion. It's me not understanding that it's okay for you to not like chocolate chip cookies. And it's okay that you said, no, thank you. I'm not really into chocolate chip cookies, or that's not the kind of cookies I like, or I don't eat eggs, or whatever your reasoning is.
Right.
The fact that you don't take the cookie is not some sort of affront or insult to me. And the fact that you don't want my affection or my show of affection is not some insult to me, right? It's like, it's perfectly okay. And when the person that's being offended, if they would be honest, they would have to admit that there are gifts they wouldn't like to receive. There are things they wouldn't want to eat. There are ways that they wouldn't want to be touched. But that for them is not in their head, right? That's not the issue. The issue is, I would be okay with this, so why aren't you okay with this? I like my cookies, why don't you like my cookies? And it is such a messed up attitude, right? Whether it's about, I love you, why don't you love me back? Or why don't you want me sending you flowers and showing you all this affection and pursuing dating you? It doesn't matter. The person doesn't want it. Just respect that they have their own things, their own desires, their own wants, their own tolerances, their own boundaries, and you have yours, and you expect people to respect yours, and you get upset when somebody violates your boundaries, so just understand when you're violating theirs. And don't say, well, I don't consider that a boundary violation, so why do you? Because that doesn't matter.
Yeah. Another back on children. There's so much to talk about here. And my son, when he was little, we have had lots of family friends, and some were very close. And there's a family that were honorary aunt, uncle, and niece, and nephew, and this sort of thing. And the mom really, really was attached to my son and helped kind of raise him in many ways. And he got to an age where she called him by his nickname, and he said, please don't call me that. And it devastated her. And she was starting to cry, and she said, I understand that this is what you want.
Right.
I just have to process this.
Right.
Because this was important to me.
Yeah.
And I was right there, and I said, this is why Aunt Susie Q is feeling this way, and you have to give her some time to get used to it. She might mess up and call you the name occasionally, but she's trying.
Right. Yeah.
I didn't say, oh, honey, this is important to Aunt Susie Q. You
Right.
have to call her that, or
Right.
you have to let her call you. No. It was a new boundary.
It is a new boundary.
Yeah, and
that's another
you have to
thing.
respect
That's another issue that people need to understand, right? And I had to deal with that the last few weeks, right? I had something in my life that represented a boundary change, and I had to kind of cope with it. Like at first, I felt very disrespected, and I felt, and so then I had to. I did exactly what I was describing. I stepped away from it. I processed it. I thought about it. I was like, why is this bothering me? Like, what is it exactly that I consider disrespectful? What is it? And to me, what it boiled down to was the way it was communicated, right? So it was like it was a new boundary, but nobody told me about it.
Oh, that's not
Yeah.
fair.
And so
Yeah.
I was just like, it would have been good if somebody could have just said to me before I came and asked, how are we going to handle this year? If somebody would have said, it's already been decided. Like instead of saying that, if somebody would have said, hey, we're looking at maybe redoing this year, and we want to make sure you're included in this conversation. And it wasn't that you can't do what you want to do. It was just, it impacts me. And yes, it's fine that you're going to do this, but it would have been respectful to just inform me.
Keep you in the loop.
Right. And so that's the thing. It's like, and so but still what it boils down to is I have to accept what somebody puts up as a new boundary. Whether I like the way it's communicated or I don't like the way it's communicated, yes, I can voice that. But the final thing is that I can't use it as leverage to then attack them for the new boundary, right? I can't say, and I think this is wrong that you're putting up this new. It's like, I don't like the way it was communicated, but I understand what you're doing here, and this is what you want, and you should do what you want. And that's kind of what, is the thing with the kid. It's like, so yeah, this is this term of endearment. She's used to calling him this. It's like, whatever, he's her little potato or, whatever it is.
Right.
And now he's saying, I'm kind of big for potato and, so I'm going to be Richard now or,
Yes,
whatever.
right. Yeah.
And so it is kind of like a blow where you're just like, it's not my little potato anymore.
It is.
I mean, I get it. It's like, it's heart-wrenching to let that go. But at the same time, it's okay to be sad about it. And part of being sad and part of me being offended like I was is that you care about the person, right? I mean, that's the thing. It's like it hurts because you like what has been going on. You like that contact. You like that association that you've got. And it's endearing and it's fun and it's, and it's that she loves him and he is her little potato.
Right.
And so when that's taken away, she feels like this loss, like I'm losing this thing now. And she is, and she's moving into a new phase. And so there's a grief that you have to go through that says, I'm going to let this go, and it hurts. And it's okay that it hurts, right? Because it hurts doesn't mean I have to blame somebody.
Right.
And it doesn't mean I have to lash out at them for doing what they did. It's like I just have to process it, like you say. You just you have to process it, and you have to learn to let it go and move into the new phase.
And to bring it full circle, that's what Biden should have done.
Yeah.
Mourned it.
Yeah, I don't
Accepted it.
I don't think he understands it though. I mean,
No, he
that's the
doesn't.
thing.
No,
It's like you can't process something you really just don't understand.
Right.
And I don't think he understands it. And I think like I say, the best if you really can't understand a thing, the best thing you can do is say, I don't get it, but I'll respect it anyway.
Right.
And if that's what he's going to do, that's what he's going to do. And okay, that's it. We'll move on. Like as far as his, but he can't really. I don't think he can really issue like an apology or anything like that because he doesn't understand what's going on. He doesn't get it, but he's willing to change his behavior, and that's the best we're going to get. And so I think it's like, okay, then let's just go on.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. Because one of the things I finally ended up saying was that, you don't have to understand it. And what Callie Wright said on some show or another, I can't remember, that acceptance is not predicated on understanding.
Right. It's not, yeah.
Yeah. If I don't understand it, I don't have to understand it.
Right.
If somebody wants to use they, them pronouns, I just freaking do it.
Right.
Yeah. I don't have to understand the whole whatever. Like some people are like, this is hard to understand.
Yeah, to me, that's like, people that want to use, like, if I walk up and I say, can I call you Steve? And you're like, no.
But I'm going to call you Steve.
Yeah, I still want to call you Steve, And you're like, that's not my name.
Well, it's so weird. Well, the weird thing is, right, like, someone gets married, they change their name.
Yeah.
everybody starts referring to them as something different.
Yeah.
You start using the numeric
Right.
name, right?
It's
some little kid goes from Timmy to Timothy or Tim, and everybody's like, "Ooh, he's not Timmy anymore. He's Tim," right?
Yeah.
And so we're all he graduates into, like, I had a kid that when I grew up, his name was Bobby, and then when he got into high school, he's like, "No, it's Robert," and he was Robert from then on, right? And so it's like people do this, and it's fine, man. Be trans, and suddenly your name is like the biggest confrontational, most, controversial issue. And what the hell? I am not calling you that. And it's like,
Really?
how is it so easy with all these other situations? But here it's freaking you out.
Among people whose entire relationship history with you spans the last 5 minutes. Suddenly, using the correct pronoun is just like, oh, I can't do that,
Yeah. It's really weird. And I mean, I think I've talked about this a little bit before on past episodes, but it's like one of the things that worries me, like I'm surprised. Sometimes somebody comes out on my wall and they're like, "I'm trans." And I'm like, "I had no idea, right? Like, I never knew this." And they basically are like, "I am not Kim anymore. I'm going to be Jonathan." And I'm like, "Oh," and then I worry because I think, what if I can't remember?
Up. Yeah.
Right. What if I just can't? It won't sink in. But after having done it with a few people, it's real easy.
It's easy.
Yeah, I mean, it's especially when they change their name on the thing, so I can see it, right? But it's not hard.
I have trans friends on Facebook now, and it's like once in a while they mention that somebody dead named them, and I have to think, it's like, what was their dead? I don't even remember what their dead name is, because once they.
I can't remember either.
Once they switch over on Facebook, it's like, okay, this person is,
that is funny. I can't remember the prior names either. Like once I get used to the new name, it's like if I really don't remember what I used to call them.
Right.
And what I used, even though I used to see it, like it was on my feed, right? And now I don't know what it was.
Yeah.
You just get used to the new. It's not that hard, and it's no harder than when someone gets married or somebody gets older or somebody. It's like it's not hard.
Yeah.
We had 2 other big things to talk about, and I don't think we're going to get to the feminist science thing, but with the time we have left, can we talk about the LGBTQ bill that's in the Texas?
Oh yeah, fun times, right?
Oh yeah.
I was stunned. Okay. There have been many bills introduced into the Texas Ledge that that give various factions the right to refuse service to LGBTQA folks. This one is for like counseling services,
anything that requires a state license.
And it's just like, oh, wow. And I thought, oh, surely this won't get out of committee. Boom, it's out of committee. And now, the last thing I saw was posted by Serafina Smith, who also does secular sexuality on the ACA here. I think she posted something that said it had gotten through the Senate and was now
I
into the
posted
House.
something. Texas State Senate passed it. So the Senate passed it.
How does this happen?
I've got the House bill up. I don't have the Senate bill up, and just word. They're not always worded the same, but they're going to be similar bills. They'll pass it back and forth. But this is basically, I've got it pulled up for people who'd like to look it up themselves. Feel free. It's House Bill 2827, and it's not that long, and it's not that difficult to understand. And just a heads up that we're going to have somebody on in May who's going to help us talk about this a little bit more.
Yes.
That has a little bit better understanding, right? Texas Freedom Network. We've invited them on because this is kind of legalese, and so we want somebody that understands this stuff better than us.
Yeah, right. Right.
But here, just let me read the intro to it. So it's relating to discrimination by a state agency against an applicant for or holder of an occupational license. And here's what it says. Basically, a state agency that issues a license or otherwise regulates a business, occupation, or profession may not adopt any rule, regulation, or policy or impose a penalty that, number 1, limits an applicant's ability to obtain, maintain, or renew a license based on a sincerely held religious belief of the applicant, or 2, burdens an applicant or license holders' free exercise of religion, regardless of whether the burden is the result of a rule generally applicable to all applicants or license holders. So in other words, even if Even if everyone else has to abide by this, if it's your sincere religious belief, you do not. Also, freedom of speech regarding a sincerely held religious belief or membership in any religious organization. It does not apply to, for some weird reason, cops. I don't know why that's a exception, but maybe the Texas Freedom Network can clue us into what the logic was behind saying police officers, they can be infringed upon and their freedom of religion violated all over the place, and that's perfectly okay with Texas. I'm wondering why that's okay. But then they say, let's see, also that it does not prohibit a state agency from taking any action to ensure that the standard of care or practice for the applicable business, occupation, or profession is satisfied. And I'm not quite sure how to interpret that, because that should be part of the licensing. And it's like, so if you're still delivering the same standards of care and practice, and what kind of rules are we talking about here?
Yeah, how can this be?
Right. The section may not be construed to authorize a license holder to refuse to provide a medical service within the scope of the person's license that is necessary to prevent death or imminent serious bodily injury, or limit any right, privilege, or protection guaranteed to any person under the Constitution and laws of this state and the United States. And that's important because not all the groups that we think of as protected groups are actually listed as legally protected groups, right? And this is where the LGBT
that's where the thing
comes in. So in other words, if your religion tells you that you can refuse services to someone who is black, that would be illegal. But if it's gay, then it's legal. So because gay is not listed in the protected classes. So what you've got going on, I mean, in my head, I'm kind of thinking, does this mean that if I'm a mental health worker, that I can talk to a patient and say, I think that part of your problem may be that you're sinning because you're gay, and that, this kind of, negativity, this depression that you're suffering is because you're not, aligned with God's word? Or does that fall under you have to provide the reasonable standard of care, right? Because that's not a professional standard of care, but it's still a religious expression. Are you allowed to do that or not do that? And that's kind of why we have Texas Freedom Network coming on, because I don't get it, right? And I will say that I have kind of an attitude about when it comes to religious discrimination under the law. Obviously, I'm not in favor of religious discrimination under the law.
Right.
I would never support a law that was passed to do harm to or discriminate against or otherwise oppress any religious group. I would not support a law that put some undue burden on those segments of the population due to a religion, and I would not support a law that was being somehow cleverly written to oppress a particular minority.
Right.
And burqa ban.
Yeah.
So let's just say, though, that when we're talking about rules and regulations, it's not about does the rule or regulation apply to everybody. It's about is it a good rule or a regulation.
It muddies the water.
Right.
It doesn't seem to.
We've seen some cases, though, where there's been a rule that applied to everybody, and it really wasn't written to be religiously discriminatory, and yet it was. And then when we looked at the law, we were like, you know what? There's really no good reason for this law. Like, this is a ridiculous law. You can't have facial hair. You can't wear a hat. Why?
Yeah.
And so we look at that and we say, okay, well, this is maybe shitty legislation, right? Or crappy policy. There's really no reason that somebody can't wear a hat. There's really no reason that you can't wear just religious jewelry, or you can't wear, this facial hair a certain way or something. It's actually not a problem. And sometimes I have a really visceral reaction where I'm just like, you can't do that. And then I start looking at it and it's like, actually, this policy is kind of stupid, right? Or excuse me, I should not use that word. But this policy is kind of, not well thought out and not necessary, right? It's unnecessary. And so then in those cases, I'm willing to say everybody should be allowed to wear a hat. Everybody should be allowed to have facial hair. There's no reason to exempt a religious person. Just take that policy away. If it's something that you can bend because it's really not necessary, why even have it at all? Let everybody have it. So I don't think that we should have religious exemptions, which is a whole other thing. I think that if a law is really not necessary and a person comes up and challenges it with religion, and we realize they can do that and it doesn't really pose a risk, then I think everyone should be allowed to bow out of it. Yeah. But if the law is a good law and it's in place for good reasons, and there is justification for it, and we don't want people not doing it or doing it, then I think that a religious exemption is just not okay. Like you shouldn't get an exemption from a good piece of legislation that is in place for good reasons, that actually serves society in some important way. And if it's not that kind of legislation, then it shouldn't exist, right? So for me, there's really no reason ever for a religious exemption. Right. Either the law is a good law and everybody should have to abide by it, or the law is not a good law and nobody should have to abide by it. And certainly we should not be writing crappy legislation in order to target religious groups, which is sometimes done. And I don't support that. But I think in this case, I mean, if a licensing board is imposing requirements that are requirements that don't really serve, why are they requirements?
Right.
That's the question, not whether or not a religious person should be exempt. And that's the scary part of it. If we have state licensing boards that are imposing willy-nilly requirements, that's what the legislature needs to look at. Why do we have such crappy requirements that don't really matter?
Well, and I mean, I look at unintended consequences of things like this, allowing these religious exemptions, basically allowing, for example, physicians to deny certain services because of their sincerely held religious beliefs. So what if you have a physician who's an anti-vaxxer? They're rare, but they exist.
Yeah, I believe in faith healing.
Yeah. Or I just don't believe in vaccines. You should get the disease naturally and get natural immunity, right? And so parents take their kids to this doctor, and let's say he's the only doctor in town because it's some small rural community somewhere, and none of their kids can get vaccinations because this guy, because of his sincerely held religious beliefs, doesn't believe in them. Furthermore, if you take your kid somewhere else and get the vaccines, he won't treat your kid because, that would be a violation of his sincerely held religious belief. And I mean, we talk about this, and it sounds like a slippery slope operation or a fallacy here, but we have, pockets of, diseases that crop up because of anti-vaxxers.
Right.
So this is not some kind of far-fetched, thing. There are doctors who, out in California in particular, who specialize in giving people exemptions, religious or otherwise, or medical exemptions based on just the parents' misunderstanding of how vaccines work. So this could happen. And so what happens if this happens here in Texas because of a law like this? It allows them to get away with it.
What's interesting is that we have, for example, some precedent with pharmacies, right? Because they've
I
got
was going to
that going
say,
on.
Yeah, the pharmacy.
we talked about this before.
And so
Right.
what some of these solutions have revolved around was the idea that the pharmacist can deny the prescription, but only if they can refer you to another pharmacy that will give you the prescription. So there has to be somebody around that'll give it to you for this person to be allowed to claim a religious exemption. And so in a case like that, it does make you wonder with religion getting more involved in medical care. I don't know if it's more or less, right? Because it's like in the past, the church is kind of where people went for medical care. And then it kind of moved into this idea of secular physicians. And now it's kind of moving back into this sort of church care in a more quiet backdoor way where the churches are buying up hospitals and then they're imposing religious restrictions on the doctors. And so what's happening is you got to ask yourself, what happens as they start to install more doctors who don't want to prescribe birth control, and you've got more pharmacies that don't want to give you that prescription? At what point do you look at this and say, this is a hardship on the patient, and so your religious freedom does not apply because now this person doesn't have access to treatment because there's not another pharmacy in town and there's not another doctor? Will the courts, when they have to look at that question, say that the religious rights and freedoms need to be set aside for the welfare of society? And that's kind of the question they haven't had to answer. They've kind of implied that it's okay to do it if there's somebody else that'll do it, but they haven't really answered the question, what do you do when there's not somebody else to do it?
Or when you haven't been informed, because that happened to me. I was, when I was pregnant with my second kiddo, I went to a highly recommended OBGYN in town. I didn't know it, but he was Catholic and wouldn't prescribe pills for anyone who wasn't married and wouldn't perform abortions and all that sort of thing. But after I gave birth, I hemorrhaged, and that it went well. Fortunately, they stopped the bleeding and got everything under control. But had it been bad enough that really they ought to have removed my uterus, he may have had a conflict there,
Right.
and not removed it because he felt that maybe I could reproduce again.
Well,
someday.
I mean, we saw something similar in Ireland, right? Where you had, I think she was Indian, and she was living in Ireland with her husband, and they had a baby that was due, and then she had some complications, and her life was in danger, and they waited too long, and then she died. And part of the reason that they waited was confusion about what the laws were around, when you can terminate a pregnancy. And so I think it was both her and the child, and the unborn died.
Yeah, I think the baby died in utero because of and then basically she got an infection, which she became septic.
Right.
And they had just waited too
long. And it isn't that the doctors even were opposed to doing the procedure. It was that they were scared of legal sanctions.
Right. I think all of her doctors were saying, hey, we're on the clock
and
here.
So
we have
they're
to
kind
do
of
this
watching it going, do we
life.
do it? Do we not do it? What if we do it and then we get, arrested? What if we do it and we lose our licenses? What if we, and it's interesting because, there's always that part of us that says, what the heck, this is someone's life. You just proceed. But there is a coercion there when you're talking about somebody's livelihood and you're saying you're going to lose your job over this or you could go to prison for this. I mean, that is not nothing held over someone's head. Yeah. And so to me, that idea that you start passing these rules and saying that this person can do this as long as it doesn't create a life-threatening situation, is this doctor allowed to decide? Is the same doctor who doesn't believe that you should have your uterus removed the one who's going to decide whether or not your life is in danger? And is that doctor, going to be too biased to make that call?
Right.
And I did not know any of this about his religion and so forth until after the birth. So,
yeah,
I think we are about to the time to be done. We're shortening up the shows these days a little bit because of time constraints and stuff like that. So the upshot is bodily autonomy. You want to give a great summary because I know you will. Don't touch unless there is either an understood or explicit.
And nobody's saying you can't do anything you want to do to another person's body. Just ask.
Yeah. Right?
Yep. That simple.
Yep. There you go. Whether you're a kid or
hey, can I give you a hug?
Or president.
Yeah. How hard is this? See, I got a hug. I still
definitely want to hug you, Tracie.
I still got hugs, right? Nobody stopped me from hugging anybody. No. And it wasn't even hard. And all I had to do was invite people to hug me, and I got hugs.
Right. Yep. There you go.
How easy it is.
Yay. And then the LGBTQ thing, the bill, we will be discussing that, or you all, I won't be on the next show, but you all will be here with somebody from the Texas Freedom Network and talk about that in greater detail, which is wonderful. I can't wait to watch the show. I want to thank my wonderful co-hosts, Tracie and Jen, just as always wonderful.
Thanks. Sure thing.
And I'm Clare Wuellner, by the way. And on the other side of the wall, the folks who just do all the cool stuff with the audio and the visual stuff, it's Mark and Vern. And I hope I haven't forgotten anybody who's in there doing all that work. Thank you to you for watching, too. And I want to leave you with one final thought. We don't need a savior. We have each other. It's all we've ever had and all we'll ever need. Bye.